bag. It's filled with 20 pounds of gold. He rushes down to the foreshore, down to Steamboat Landing. He sees a boat there. He jumps into the boat with the treasure and the bag, and he rows out towards the Reliance. They see him. Some of the crew members see him, and they start to turn the boat back. And he thinks, and he pulls up towards the sternwheeler, and he reaches up with the treasure bag like this. But there's 20 pounds of gold in the treasure bag, and just as the percher reaches for it, he drops the bag. With 20 pounds of gold, it acts like an anchor. It sinks out of sight, much to his astonishment and dismay. And so he has to report back. He rows back to shore in considerable difficulty because he knows there's problems. And he informs Dietz and Nelson that the treasure bag has been dropped, and he has witnesses to it, and therefore they have to make, Dietz and Nelson then sends out word that anyone who would send express by that bag, they will honor it. Dietz and Nelson felt that they could recover the bag. And this was September the 11th, 1863.
1863.
That's right, 124 years ago. So what happens is, Dietz then gets hold of what he called underwater armor equipment, which is really kind of a deep-sea diving gear of the time. Kind of rough, not very good, but good enough, he thinks, to get down about 30 feet. Dietz himself comes into Yale to look for the treasure. But by then, the purser on the boat and the agent are not sure exactly where it was dropped, or nor are the other people. So he combs the bottom of that river. Very difficult river to comb because it's a treacherous river, it's a dangerous river, and of course 20 pounds of gold might sink under the mud just slightly. Because it's being churned up, you see. It's being churned up by the sternwheelers.
It is low water because it's September.
It is low water, that's correct. So he looks for 2 or 3 days underwater, is unsuccessful. But he is still convinced from all the people who saw what happened that it's still there. He goes back again and tries. He is not successful. He finally, eventually gives up. He could not find the express bag. As far as we know, Mike, and it's quite certain from the documentation of this story, that the express bag, filled with 20 pounds of gold, about $100,000 or $125,000, is still down somewhere, right, current value. At those days, it was only valued at $3,700, which was still considerable. So the company didn't want to take this loss. So it's still down somewhere just off Sternwheeler Landing, sitting in the mud.
I mean, Mr. Higgins was a believable enough man, because I got a scenario which doesn't take much of an imagination. He says, yeah, I've been passing this gold along for a long time. I think I'll just empty this, load it up with some cast iron, run down there, dropped it in the lake, and then I've got the $3,700 that I can whittle away at my time. I may be insulting the Higgins name, but why don't you think that happened?
Well, we're not sure exactly what happened, but if it was Higgins at this particular time, Higgins' background, and he was a writer as well, indicates that he was not a thief. And so therefore, and these agents were chosen very carefully. Wells Fargo chose their agents carefully. Dietz and Nelson chose their agents carefully. So did the BC Express. So did, Billy Ballou even. So these individuals, when they chose an agent to handle their gold and the treasure that came in, they were extremely cautious who they chose. They didn't just take somebody off the street. They had to know the background of this individual. So probably that scenario sounds good, probably didn't take place. I think it took place as described.
$120,000 worth of gold coin and gold nuggets and gold powder dust somewhere there, just off Steamboat Landing.
That's right.
At Yale.
That's right.
You can see the iron in the walls right now where they tied up.
You can see the ring bolts right there, and you can see where the stern wheeler was just pulling away. You know approximately the area, but it's probably 200 feet by 200 feet.
All right. I'm going to take a break here and come back because, as in all of these wonderful pioneer towns, it had a pinnacle of its success and its demise, and we're going to come back and talk more about Yale right after this break. Barley. So this town of Yale started in the 1850s.
Well, it started before that. It started as a fort before that, but the actual town started in 1858. That's right, Mike.
And it, like all the others, reached its heyday and then petered out. What are we talking about for its heyday?
Okay, you're talking from 1858 probably to 1864, 60, 65 perhaps, just after the Caribou hit its height and then started declining. And it probably lasted to a degree to about 1869 or 70. By 1870, it was definitely in the doldrums. And by 1880s, this shot is taken in the 1880s, shows a fire that swept along Front Street And this was when the railroad construction was back in here, but Yale never really recovered from this blow.
It might have just fallen into decline, but this certainly speeded that decline.
This hastened it considerably.
Did it destroy everything?
It destroyed most of Front Street. You can see the odd building standing in the background. That's a brick building, but most of Front Street was gone.
Front Street would have been where you see right next to the river, just on there. That's where Front Street is.
Just
right
up
there.
above Sternwheeler Landing. That's right. You can see it, and they're starting to rebuild a little bit, but most of that Front Street in this photograph, 1880s again, is gone. So Yale is virtually finished.
And the reason why I guess they never built it is because the transportation method has gone from the right-hand side of the picture to the left, to the railway.
That's right. The sternwheelers were replaced by the rail.
And hence, no need to build the buildings there again.
Not much.
What is this?
You know, Mike, that was a shot I took in the 1970s, and it shows an old vault which was in the Chinese section of Yale, and there's an old steel door that actually covers this vault, and the vault itself is made of stone, very carefully pieced together. And this was kind of a fireproof vault, so the Chinese could keep their valuables. They were afraid of fire whipping along Front Street, and of course they were correct. And you know, so they had to safeguard their valuables by using vaults like this.
And that was there in the 70s. Is it still there today? Is there much evidence
that vault is still there today. Actually, Yale has quite a bit of atmosphere, Mike. You know, you can go down on Sternwheeler Landing. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to, you know, to almost see the Sternwheeler coming around the bend up from Hill's Bar.
Yeah.
And then you look over to the shore itself, and you can see the ringboat still in the, as I mentioned before, right fastened into the rocks. And then up you can see the trail that will lead up to Front Street, and then of course St. John the Divine, the original Anglican church, which is still there from the 1860s, and of course nothing left in Front Street. But you can see where the miners once trod and where the railroad men came in after them. Then you look up towards the mouth of the canyon itself, and you can see the defile and Lady Franklin Rock, and you can envision the miners shooting the river and coming down into Yale, glad to get there because they emerged from the big canyon alive.
How big a town was Yale at its most? I guess it was a transit point, so more people went through it, obviously.
Actually, probably hit about 3,000, Mike. So that was quite a big town in British Columbia. Yeah. Victoria was first. Yale was probably at that time bigger than Westminster. And then, of course, beyond Yale, you got into the Barkerville goldfields in Barkerville itself. So the Caribou, the big town in the Caribou was Barkerville. And the population generally is given of 10,000 in Barkerville. It wasn't 10,000. Yeah. It was probably 3,000, 3,500.
Where are we going to go next time?
We're going into the Caribou, one of the most fascinating parts of the Caribou, and an area that is not well known by most British Columbians. And it was the first big town in the Caribou, Quesnel Forks, at the junction of the Quesnel River and the Caribou River.
Predated Barkerville?
Predated Barkerville.
All right. That's next time on Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. The town will visit Quesnel Forks. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.